Hello and welcome to another episode. Thanks for hanging out with us so you think you're fine, peeps, with your host, Artemis.
Hey
and
guys.
Your girl, Beesh Money. Just kidding, Bethany. It's so nice to have you guys for another episode. So what are we going to talk about today? What's on the plan?
On the agenda today?
Yeah, thank you. My brain wasn't braining right there.
Trust issues.
Ooh.
Let's talk about trust issues.
I'm for it.
I know a lot of people don't like to talk about it, and they, kind of like bottle it up in, but I thought since have been going into this whole digging deep into yourself kind of era that we've been talking about everything else,
Yeah,
I thought trust issues was a good one.
And if you guys listen to our other podcasts, we dabbled a little bit into just dating in the modern world, so this is a portion of it that, correlates. To start, we just wanted to get some facts, just in the combo. Doing some research.
You did?
I did.
You did the
for
stats
once.
this time?
I'm going to be the stats girl this time.
Get it, girl.
Gladly going to pass it over to you in the next episode. But that being said, trust issues can stem from a variety of past experiences, influences, such as childhood experiences.
I thought that was a big one.
Indeed. Social rejection, traumatic events, betrayal, mental health conditions. Oh, I didn't even think about that. Okay. Attachment styles, and personality disorders.
Personality disorders.
Interesting.
Interesting.
So, doing research, one article says for childhood experiences, inconsistent parenting, abuse, neglect, or witnessing parental conflicts can lead to trust issues. Okay. I could see that because you are a product of your environment. And if you grew up in like a very unstable household emotionally, that can definitely dictate how you develop your own emotions, trust, all that jazz. I know think about it, like at that stage, you're just like a very young child, your brain is forming, you're learning how to, just be a person, like how to treat others, how to communicate, all that. And if your home, which is like a good majority of where you learn and grow, isn't like the healthiest environment for that, you learn the traits of what you were taught, whether good or bad.
So I feel, based on my previous studies on things, just throwing it out there.
Let's go. You were ready. You are the true stat girl.
Freud said that a child truly develops between the age of 1 to 7.
Oh, wow. Did not know that.
So pretty much when they're becoming a little human, I would say, because they're still little, obviously, but they're developing their core personalities between the 1 to 7 year. After the 7 year, they're technically like developed as a personality that they're going to have.
Okay.
And then after the 7th year and up, obviously, we evolve, we learn, we, can change certain behaviors by working on them. But our core personality is developed, meaning that how you are raised by your family, how you are, with friends and, grandparents and cousins and things like that. The way that you are raised is going to develop you as who you are. Now you can grow and change, like I said, because we change and we learn things through life, but your true core personality is already developed. So if that's saying that you're having childhood trauma, you're going to start mirroring and getting all that, the true person that you are. If your parents are in a lot of fights, if your parents are, going through a divorce, if they are, if they have their own issues, their own attachment styles. Certain parents can be very narcissistic.
Correct.
And when you're being born, you're being raised with the narcissistic parents, you tend to get certain narcissistic personalities that they have.
Yeah.
So they bring you down. So, when you're also dealing with parents who are very critical.
That makes sense, because then you're going to be critical. Like
it
all comes down
pleaser.
to, yes, because you're just a product of your environment. So if your parents were always people pleasing or very critical, very hard on themselves, you're going to be hard on yourself.
100%.
And if your parents they weren't emotional and open about their feelings, and it was like a no, like you never see dad sad, mad, any of that, then therefore you were never, because
agree with
you're
that.
just going with the flow.
Yeah. So like based on your personal experiences, like what would you say that you had to work hard on to overcome as like a personality thing that you gained from your parents?
Yeah, I mean, there's like a lot, right? I mean, nobody's perfect. My parents, they definitely like try to do their best, but again, my dad came from a very like Hispanic background where like the male just, provides and works and like I don't know, my dad just wasn't very emotional, if that makes sense.
He was
He I don't
he
know, I
wasn't very
was
emotional?
not
Yeah.
very
Okay.
emotional, just very like he would say like I love you, like hey, how are you, like all that, but like never like below that surface level,
Yeah.
like it was kind of like very weird. Like to this day, I can't really remember like the last time my dad was like, "Hey, I'm proud of you,"
Yeah.
like. But that's just how he was raised, Like my grandpa was a very like strong family provider, loving, very caring. But like he, at least from like what I saw with like my grandpa when he was alive with my dad, like I didn't really hear him too much say of like, "Hey, mijo, how are you?" Like like how are you feeling? Like not like they never did that. It was just more like, "Oh, how are things? Good, okay, cool." Like, "Oh, there's food." Like like they had each other's backs. But like I could tell my dad and my grandpa never really got more like to a more emotional level.
Yeah.
If that makes sense. And my grandma was that person for my dad, but also too, my grandma was taking care of 4 other kids, and they owned a business, and like my grandma was also like sewing clothes for the neighbors, like all that stuff. Like they were just working hard. So it was hard, and it's a lot of kids to like, I cannot imagine how, like I don't even know how big families successfully like help their kids, like
Yeah.
there's so many personalities, there's so many things you got to teach them, like all that, and like if you're working and you're busy, like it's a lot, to truly like crack that shell and help them develop, and it takes a lot. But like my dad, he just, I don't know, he's loving and caring, and I know he loves me, but like he just never really opened up in that way. So like me, that's what I learned from my dad. And like my mom, she's the complete opposite. Like she is very emotional, very open about that, very like, I'm proud of you, I love you, I'm sad, I'm hurting, like all that, So like it was kind of weird to have that. And that's like something I noticed with my parents, is that they didn't mesh in that way. Like my mom would talk to my dad and be like, "Hey, I'm hurting, I'm sad," and my dad would be like, "You're exaggerating, like stop being ridiculous." So then therefore I feel like I grew up thinking emotions were ridiculous.
Yeah.
Like I definitely became more of like a hard-shelled kid, like very externally okay and happy, but internally like not happy, and didn't know how to like express my emotions.
Yeah.
So that's like something that I've learned, and that's just because like that was my environment, like that's what I learned from my dad, and my mom was like the extreme of it, and she had her own battles with like mental health and stuff. So like I didn't know if I could truly take that from her because of the inconsistency, that I just took my dad's quality traits more.
Yeah.
So I noticed like growing up as an adult, I have that, and like I've been working on it more of like, don't be so hard on yourself, like take a moment to acknowledge, like be proud, and just like express your emotions, because it does help more.
How do you think that works in the relationship that you have with Alex?
I mean, it's definitely like a work in progress on just like communicating that stuff, because I'm very easy to be like, "I'm fine, it's okay, I'm fine," in reality, like I'm not fine,
Yeah.
But that's just something I've like struggled with a lot, just in general, like as a kid, young adult, previous relationships, current relationship. But with Alex, like I feel safe enough to like talk about it, even though it's hard,
Yeah.
But I do feel like I can like chat with him, and I don't always make the most sense. Like that's one of the things too, is I'm kind of bad at delivering initially.
Okay.
And then after I word vegetate, then I like kind of am able to put it together in a better way. So I always tell him like, "Hold on, let me just explain like how I'm feeling, and then let me like circle back and like condense it for you." Because I'll just kind of like vomit it, like I'm just like, "Oh, I feel so blah, 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 blah." And then I'm like, "Actually, I'm just kind of sad because of XYZ," but I just like let the emotion build. And then I just like, when I finally open, it's like a lot. And then it's like, well, actually it's kind of condensed to this, but those made me feel that way.
Yeah.
If that makes sense.
No, that makes sense.
But we're still learning and growing. I'm still trying to get better at it. And how
That's
about
why
like,
I said, how have you been, like working past those things? And it's
Correct.
great that you have acknowledged that, because what happens is that a lot of adults, people, my age or your age, some people like even older, they still have never been able to acknowledge that.
Yeah.
Or their even attachment styles that they have. So they always will be like the victim.
Correct.
Well, I'm this way because of this,
Yeah.
versus working on themselves. So, yeah, no, 100%. I can relate to the way that you are closed off on things, because I feel like I am the same way, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
The way that I grew up with my grandparents raising me for a little bit. You know, my dad was very much on and out with like, you know, hospitals when I was very young with my mom.
Yeah.
And I think that they were also young when they had me. Like my mom was 23 and my dad was 27. So they're still kind of, you know, they're still young.
Yeah.
Having, you know, a kid and being a mom and a dad. And obviously times were different, which was the normal way to have kids at the time. And you know, you make it work. But when it's coming down to like, and my mom is very critical.
Oof. Yeah.
Like super critical, because my grandpa was that way too.
Yeah.
My grandpa was like an architect, so he was extremely like picky on things and very organized. And my mom is the same way when it comes to like OCD things.
Yeah.
So if things are not perfect to her perfect, then you're doing something wrong.
Correct.
So there was never a time like I always had to be like a very much of like, and I didn't get a lot of attention as an only child for being an only child. So I feel like when people are just like, oh my gosh, you're such an only child, you must be spoiled, you must be this. I'm completely like opposite on that. Like I'm not spoiled. I can be sassy at times for sure. But also like I was raised with a grandpa that was just like, you could do whatever you want. Like you're strong. Like, why are you crying?
Correct.
There's no point to cry. Like you don't cry kind of deal. So I was kind of raised like usually they would raise like a boy to tell him not to cry.
Yeah.
So expressing emotions was very hard. And I would always try to like hold it in even as a kid.
Yeah.
But I also had to like please my parents in a way like I always had to like, it's hard to explain it, but like the best way that I can explain it is always did something to make sure that I didn't do it wrong.
Yeah.
Or if I did it, it had to be perfect. So like in school, I was always with like an A student. Like in Albania, it's like number 10. You have to get 10, whatever, because it was like numbers. But it was always like an A student. Like I was always doing extra things. I was always trying to just make sure that they were happy. So what I feel has trickled down to, because, you know, with everything that went on, which is another conversation, another topic, but what has come down to now is that I tend to put other people in front of myself.
Yeah.
So they always, like, I will always make sure that somebody is, not that, and it's the weirdest part, Beth. I never cared if people like me or not. Isn't that weird? Like, it's strange. I don't care if you like me or not. I've never been like a people-pleasing per se to make people like me or not, because I could care less. I'm very picky on who I choose to have in my life.
Yeah.
I like people who are honest and loving and caring. And I know that if I leave a room, they're not talking behind my back. That's the people that I surround myself with.
Yeah.
And if I've seen otherwise, then I'm moving out of the picture, right? Which is okay. I can love you from afar. But for not being very much people-pleasing, I'm still people-pleasing with certain people.
Yeah.
Because I want to make sure that I like show affection, or like, and I don't show affection with like verbiage, because I'm very closed off on that.
Yeah. It was just something you didn't learn as a child.
Yeah.
It wasn't in your environment.
It wasn't a safe environment to express how I feel, because it was more like, you don't cry. There's no point to cry. Like you move on, you grow up, you pick up, like what are you crying for? That was one of the things, and it's Eastern Europeans. I do this all the time. What are you crying for? There's people who have no food in this world. What are you crying for? Okay, get up. You're fine. You're fine. Like the whole thing, like you're fine, has always been there.
Yeah.
So with the specific people that I always like, the way that I show love is like maybe a little bit more extra care on certain things. Like a food for us in Europe, it's different than food in America. Like when people are here, like I don't cook for whoever I'm going on dates with or whatever it may be. In Europe, it's like that's how we show, like, because that's how you break bread.
It's a form of love, right?
It's
like
a form of love.
Yeah.
It's like if I'm sharing food with you, it means that I trust you and you're a good friend. Like it's just how it works. So like it's a little bit different on obviously like different, you know, cultures, I guess.
Correct.
But like for me, if I show those affections, it means that I trust you and I care for you, even as a friend or a romantic partner. But what I have tried to see in the, especially like my past relationship, is that I avoided certain topics that I should have not avoided. And because I cared so much for that person, based on their trauma that they had in the past, their childhood trauma, their things that they went through,
Yeah.
I just made excuses for their behavior.
Oof.
And because I cared so much,
Yeah.
I let things slide. And I just continued to, like, maybe if I show more love, they'll understand. Or maybe if I do this, or maybe if I do that. And it was one of those things that it's like, you can't do that. Because I put them first versus them myself.
Correct.
And then you end up hurting because maybe the person still cares, maybe the person doesn't, but maybe they don't care at all.
Yeah.
And that's hard to like see at the end of the day.
Correct.
But based on my past experiences with my family and how I was raised, I feel like that has stemmed to my current relationships and how I, handle things. Because if I care, like I overly care sometimes.
Yeah.
With that person, but I put them first versus putting myself first.
Yeah.
So I have been working on, obviously, like, it is what it is kind of deal. Like, I'm going to give as much as you give back. And I'm no longer putting much more effort on things. And I'm no longer letting things slide as far as, like, the way that you behaved. It's not my part to fix your trauma or to make excuses for your past trauma unless you are working on your stuff and I'm working on my stuff.
Yeah.
Because I will end up being hurt. So
Agreed.
that's how my trauma has, impacted my life,
Yeah. And I mean, everybody has like their own different story and how they, developed as a child, how they develop in their relationships, all that. And everybody's story is different, which is a beautiful thing at the same time because, when you talk about it, you find these similarities. But exactly to your point, I mean, nobody's perfect. You got to work through it. Your significant other has to be vulnerable with you and let you know what they need to work on. And they need to take that initiative. And, you need to be there for them, just like they need to be there for you when you're doing it,
Yeah.
But if they're not willing to do that, then that's a different story. But it is so crazy how everybody's childhood is just different. And the traits that they take from it stems from that,
Yeah.
And I think it does play into like being an adult and like who we surround ourselves with, and we typically find ourselves with like people that had similar experiences,
Yeah.
Maybe not identical, but enough to where like they can understand that like, oh, I do remember like feeling that way, or
Yeah.
which is kind of crazy how we do that.
I'm a huge person when it comes to energy. We're all energy. So technically you attract what you kind of fear. And whatever, depending on your attachment style, you attach the opposite. Because you are making up for certain things that the other person is having. So like trauma attracts trauma.
Oh, okay.
So like your attachment personality will attract something else from their attachment personality. So like, I know that you're the stats queen, but I did some digging too, obviously, because
you're
we're talking
the
about
stats queen. Let's not confuse it for this episode.
You're in it for today.
Yes.
But there's 4 major attachment styles.
Yes.
So you have the secure, the anxious, preoccupied. So technically like an avoidant, I guess.
Okay.
Then you have dismissive avoidant, I should say. And then fearful avoidant.
Can you give us a little breakdown of them each?
Yes. So pretty much secure. Like anybody that's secure, that's like the best one to be.
Okay.
Like you are secure, you're confident, you know your self-worth.
Okay.
And you accept supports. So pretty much like you accept like support from other people too.
Yeah.
Because you're secure with yourself.
Okay.
You don't let other people pretty much bug you.
Nice.
If that makes sense.
Yeah.
Because usually we let other people's emotions affect us.
Correct.
Now the avoidant, they are distant. They're unemotional and they avoid closeness. So this is, if somebody has an avoidant attachment style, that means that if I get close to you, let's say, and I'm avoidant, I'm going to find every way to push you away before you push me away.
Oh, like I'm going to sabotage this before. I'm going to make you not want to be with me, and I'm going to end it before you find out that you don't want to be with me.
Because I'm avoiding the connection that we have together.
Oh.
So I let you as close as I want to, but not close enough for you to fully know me.
Wow, okay.
So you're distant and you're also unemotional. So whenever people are like, I love you, you're like,
do you?
unemotional.
Yeah.
Like you don't feel it.
Yeah.
Then the other one is anxious. The anxious style is clingy, highly emotional, seeking reassurance. So usually what happens is the anxious always finds an avoidant. Because the anxious, because they're clingy and they're seeking the reassurance, they always seek it from an avoidant because they think that they can fix that person. Because they're very unattached. You know how, like, if you give something to, like, a kid and then you take it away, what does the kid want?
That thing.
That they want that thing.
Yeah.
So when somebody is clingy with an anxious attachment style, and they're obviously, like, highly emotional, and they are seeking reassurance, if I'm seeking reassurance from you and you're, like, giving it to me, because the avoidance will give it to you for a little bit until they cannot, it's too close for them. Then they pull back. So it's like this pull back and forth attachment with the anxious. But what happens is that when the avoidant does this to them, it brings up their trauma. And it brings up their what do you call it? Panic attacks they get a lot. Their stress, their self-worthiness goes down because now they think, because of playing like the pull and give, it's like it's bringing up all of these emotions that they were already feeling. So now they become either extra clingy to make sure that, like, to show their love.
Correct.
Or they become, like, very, constantly, like, asking for, like, reassurance, and they're highly emotional on everything they do. Versus the other one completely, like, becomes unemotional. Like, they avoid it.
Weird.
So those two go together. Usually that's how trauma people find each other. And then the other one is disorganized, which is an intense push and pull, unpredictable. So pretty much that one is kind of like an avoidant as well too, because you're technically doing the pull and pull. Push and pull, not pull and pull, push and pull. Yeah.
How weird. And then what's
strange?
So
that's 4 of them.
That's so crazy how we literally, like, everybody has trauma in their own way, but somehow, like, they seem to find each other, like the complement or the complete opposite, but yet it's what they want, like it's what they feel like they need.
So it's kind of weird to me because some people can be multiple.
That's
like
true.
Things. Like, for example, like the anxious one that it talks about that. Emotionally volatile, fears rejection, anxious and clingy, romanticizes people, and seeks reassurance. So you're technically romanticizing people.
Wow.
So it's like you know the theory when you put people in your pedestal, right? So, like, I'm putting you in a pedestal, but I'm not seeing you for your true colors and who you are, but I see your potential.
Oh, so is it like the rose-colored glasses?
Correct.
Wow.
And that's anxious. So if you have grown up with, like, not a lot of love given to you, you become this because you have to overly do things.
Oh, because you just have to feel like, you always feel like you have to see the good in people, like because they don't give it to you. So
you have to, like, constantly get that. So the other one that we talked about, it talks about, like, fierce connection, poor boundaries, extreme responses, emotionally, and hot and cold. So some of these things fall into, like, a line, like you can have multiple things from them. Because I do feel like the dismissive is very hot and cold as well too. Because it says it struggles with closeness, withdraws, over-independent, emotionally distant, unresponsive. So, like, for me, like, I would think that I probably have had in the past of a little bit of dismissive and anxious.
I feel like I'm dismissive and anxious too, honestly. Because, like, I don't really like to let people get super close to me. Like, truly, truly close. But then I always try to see the best in people, to where even though sometimes it's like, sis, like, I'm reaching. Like, they really aren't that great of a person. Like, you gotta, distance yourself.
So that's crazy.
Indeed, there's so much into it, which is wild. And, like, the attachment styles, and there's also personality disorders as well too. Like, it's never ending.
And there's so many as well too. Like, you also have, like, childhood attachment styles, which it flows into this, but it stems from their parents.
Correct.
And the way that their attachment styles are, like the secure, the avoidant, disorganized, you have all that. And it talks about how, like, withdrawals, quiet, anxious, same old things. And it comes straight from your parents. Or grandparents too. Basically the environment you were raised in.
Correct. Depending on how your environment was compared to others. Which is crazy. And also too, like, traumatic events as well also play into it too. And that could be, like, your own personal relationships outside of, like, your childhood.
Yeah.
And also too, like, life-changing events as well, you know, like, I don't know, like thinking about someone who goes out of the States and like military and like going through those traumatic events, like literally almost dying, and then coming back, like, how do you, like, they're always like on edge, you know what I mean? Like, you can't trust anyone, and especially with like society today and not knowing, like, you literally don't know who you're dealing with, you know?
Yeah.
Like,
I feel like when you know, obviously, like, I have a couple of military friends, so based on their past that they talk about, it's obviously extremely traumatic.
yeah.
Seeing people dying, you know, your friends taking their own lives, all of that stuff. But like when they come back, I feel like they're so closed off and they're so avoidant. Like if I were to pick like a style for them, it would be an avoidant.
Yeah.
Like they're avoiding the closeness because if that person were to die, then you have to deal with it. Like you have to feel the feels and you have to do all that. And I think that's like the hardest part. But I do think that like most military people have the avoidant attachment style.
Agreed. And I think they feel like they're alone too. Like, who can, like, honestly, like, not a lot of people can relate to the trauma they went through, you know?
I can't relate to them going to war.
Neither can I.
I can relate living in a war.
Yeah.
But I didn't fight in a war, so
Correct.
I was a kid. It's a different story.
Correct. And I can't relate to that with you. So, like, if you were to, like, try and talk about that, like, I could only do so much to, like, be there for you, you know? And I feel like some people feel like with just topics in general of that, like, it's not worth, like, talking about, you know, and, like, just digging deeper because, like, who can relate to that?
Yeah. I think when you're a kid and you go through war and, like, honestly, with everything that's going on with Israel and Palestine and everything else, it's like, it's extremely triggering, which I don't talk politics and I don't talk anything about that on social media. Everybody has their own opinions, and then you have like friendships ruined because of everybody's opinion, which everybody can just give their own opinion. That's yours. You have the right to do that.
Correct.
But don't push it on others, right?
Correct.
I just, the whole children being there and being at war, it just kind of like triggers parts of living that war. Now, was it at that extent that they're going through? Not really, but there were certain things that were happening that basically bring your trauma into trusting other people.
Yeah.
So, I don't know. I mean, this whole P. Diddy case that we're talking about.
Oh my gosh, I haven't even dabbled too much into it, and I heard it's wild.
It's wild. Like, all this kids being kidnapped and stuff, and you know, maybe people who have no idea, and I'm gonna say this, but I don't care, like, people that live in America have never really truly seen a war, right? So a lot of people are very much sheltered. They just listen to the news, whatever the news tells them. It could be real information, it could be not real information, they just still believe it. But this has been going on for a long time, like trafficking and all that. You know, my dad had to walk me to school and pick me up from school with guards in our school because people would break in, kidnap the kids, and take them straight to Italy.
Jeez.
Like, that was happening. That's something that was 100% happening.
That could have been legit you one day.
Could have been. Like, if we were only going to school for like 3-4 hours at the time right after the war. Not even a full day at school.
Wow.
So whenever like these things are coming to light in a way, it's very triggering, but also comes back to like childhood traumas. Like, I don't trust other people. Like, if, you know, like when you teach kids here in America, like if a random stranger came up and said like, you know, come with me, I have a puppy or whatever, like certain things.
Something.
I'd be like, who are you? Like, don't even talk to me. I would probably kick him if I was a kid.
That's good.
Still.
Yeah, that's
honestly,
good.
like that's what we were taught. We're like, you don't.
Yeah.
But that has brought trauma into trusting, like, you know, other people. All those things stem from it.
And
That's a traumatic event.
Correct. And also too, like, trauma from your parents being passed on to you as a child. Like, it just goes deep and deep and deep. You know, like.
What is that saying? Sins of a father.
I don't know. What is it?
Have you heard about that saying? It's a sins of a father usually will follow the children.
Really?
So depending on how the father was, the sins, unless like they talk about like repenting and things like that, so they're not passed down. But usually sins of a father will follow the child.
Give me an example, like.
I don't know. Like, if somebody did really bad things, the sins of the father will follow the kid. So something will happen to the kid, or you know, the kid will become rebellious or whatever it may be.
Wow.
That's the best way that I can explain it.
Okay.
But like it follows down. Like I'm talking about like trauma being passed down.
Generationally.
Generationally passed down.
That is wild. There's so many little sayings like that like when you realize that like they're saying for a reason, you know, like there are meanings to it, you know, like
Yeah.
which is crazy to think about that. Man. Childhood trauma is wild. We've all been through some crazy stuff. Dude, also too, like don't forget like just social trauma as well.
Yeah.
Like if you've been like socially rejected, traumatized, like all of that, like
yeah.
that also plays into how you perceive yourself and how you carry yourself like moving forward.
Have you ever felt like socially, because what did it say? One of them said socially rejected.
Yeah, it said being bullied or socially isolated can lead to a fear or trusting others.
Okay.
Like being
have you ever
bullied.
felt that?
Not necessarily. I mean, I definitely like, I don't know, just society like we put this pressure on so much of like fitting in and like all that and like wanting to be accepted to where like it has a lot of pressure on it too. And I can't imagine like fortunately was not bullied, so I can't like express that or you know share any trauma of that. But that's hard, you know, like you are a kid growing and everyone is just trying to like grow and learn their own way, figure out who they are as a person. But like an example, like your average bullies are kids that are just so unhappy at home.
Yeah.
You know, like their parents are abusive, their parents are alcoholics, their parents are non-existent, you know what I mean? And they're just like struggling to express their emotions and all they know is hurt, so that's what they share to others.
Yeah.
You know, so like being a kid that is just trying to find their way and loving and caring of others and then being bullied, like I could totally see how that would make you traumatic and change how you would see like your self-worth, you know?
Yeah.
And how you treat others, which is unfortunate.
I was never bullied. I think the only thing that was a little bit different for me is obviously like I'm very Eastern European and you know like 7th grade and stuff, like people just did not look like me, like with dark hair and you know whatnot. So I think that made me feel a little bit out of place. That's so strange to say, but it did make me feel a little bit out of place. I'm like, I don't look like blonde girls with blue eyes kind of deal. Like I have dark features. I have dark hair and, you know, darker eyes. And then, you know, so that was kind of strange, but that's to the extent of the bullied. And I was never like a bully either. Like I was never.
Correct. I hated that.
I was friends with everybody.
Yeah.
Even in high school, I was friends with everybody. I was friends with the foreign kids, you know, because obviously I was a foreign.
Yeah.
I was in ESL. But I was friends with everybody. Like as long as you had a good vibe and you were a good person, then I didn't have an issue with that. And I always like stood up for other people too.
Yeah.
I don't like when people are being bullied.
Same. I always was like raised of like treat others with respect, you know, and like I did not like that. Like when people were just bullying other kids, like they have no right, you know, like I knew it was all stemming from like their own hurtings. You know, like the bully itself was hurting, so they were just taking down other people.
Yeah.
And like that's not fair to do that to someone else because they didn't do anything to you, you know, like maybe they're different than you, but who cares, you know?
Yeah.
Does it really matter that much?
I mean, who cares? It's high school to begin with.
I know.
Like,
I know.
Half those people that were the most popular kids are probably losers these days.
They typically are. They typically are.
So, like, relax, kids.
I know. But when you're a kid, you know, you don't know anything else but that, right? Like, that's the most important thing at the time. So you're like, oh, like, I need to fit in. I need to blah, blah, all that. Like, and it's unfortunate. But I hope that, like, as you get older, you just realize more and more, like, has no value, you know? It's better to be your own person and to be with people that you enjoy regardless of what they look like, what they do, and you know that's what matters most for sure.
Honestly, that was my thing. I didn't really care. I liked who I liked. I was friends with who I wanted to be friends with. That was it. But childhood trauma, man.
I know. We're gonna definitely do another episode getting some more facts and digging into it. I love like the different personalities. Like that was the trauma. Yeah, like it's you can go so deep into it, and I think like to your extent of what you said, like everybody has probably like bits and pieces of it, you know.
There's
Like, you're
a
not just
test
one
you can
box. Really?
There's a Google test that we can take, and we can definitely see our personalities.
We should do that, and
I think
then
we
try
should
and
do it
like
and share it.
Yes, we should do it. Then we should do an episode just kind of like breaking down like where we think that stemmed from.
Oh, that's a great idea.
That's a great idea.
I think we should do that and we should share it. And I would like to tell my audience that do not judge me.
This is supposed to be a judge-free zone. Not everyone's gonna relate or agree with what we have to say, but it just matters of like sharing your story, you know. And our hopes is that someone that's listening can relate, or at least can maybe open up their mind to understand like what we went through.
I mean, honestly, this whole podcast that we started was specifically for relating to people, like, you know, sharing our stories. And so many people feel the way that we do, but nobody like tends to express it. And I just wanted to be obviously like for both of us to share. And we have little different age groups as well too that listen to it, and you know, they can relate. Someone can relate to your age group, someone can relate to my age group, but I feel like everybody's going through the same, you know, waves as we are.
Yeah.
So.
I mean, like I said in, I believe, our early podcast, like, we're just trying to figure out this thing called life, you know?
Yep.
And it's crazy, and there's so much to go into consideration, and you're not alone, and everybody has a unique story, and I think everybody should have the opportunity to, you know, share theirs and just figure out, like, what they need to do. And life is wild, but it matters that you have good people around you, whether that's family or friends, and you just grow as an individual.
Yeah. Exactly. So we should definitely take the test. We're going to do the next episode on our test. We're going to share our results with you guys.
Correct.
Because they're probably going to think I'm crazy, but that's okay.
Yeah, we just ask you, since we're going to be vulnerable in that way and do that, to take the test as well and let us know what you got back. Just some feedback,
I'm going to put the test on the link.
Yeah, let's do that.
On our podcast, let's put on the link. You guys take it. Take a look and see what your attachments are, and then basically, by taking this test, it's probably going to give you a little window of what you need to work on yourself to grow yourself as well, too. And, you know,
And if you want to share, cool. If not, that's okay as well. But at least you get to find something out that you didn't maybe know. Well, thanks so much, guys, for listening. We will see you next time.
Thanks, guys.